is the economic crisis of what has been termed the credit crunch. Strange as it may sound, the evidence points to one fact. The Holy Quran guided us by saying, avoid interest, because interest is such a curse that it is a danger for domestic, national and international peace. 22nd of October 2008. The prohibition of interest is central to the economic philosophy of Islam. Allah loves beneficence towards the poor and the needy and the equitable distribution of wealth among people. The system of interest strikes at the heart of these blessings. A study conducted by leading scholars in which they sought alternatives to the interest-based global economy concluded that, quote unquote, by applying the Islamic approach, a lot of human misery could have been avoided. This shows that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had laid the foundations for economic peace. Strained relations between the rulers and the ruled is another factor that can disturb peace. Islam prefers a democratic government, but does not preclude any form of government. Failure of governments and political systems, however, can cause misery and disaffection and can lead to demonstrations, industrial strife, rebellion and disorder. The teachings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ are indispensable to the establishment of national peace. He taught that authority vested in rulers is not their private property, but a national trust that must be discharged with absolute justice, and that government should be carried out in consultation with the people. At the same time, he admonished the people to realize that the power to choose their rulers was a gift from Allah and should therefore be carefully invested in only those who fully deserve them. The Holy Quran states, "Verily, Allah commands you to make over the trust to those entitled to them, and that when you judge between men, you judge with justice. And surely excellent is that with which Allah admonishes you. Allah is all-hearing, all-seeing." Chapter 4, verse 59. After vesting authority in rulers, the Holy Prophet ﷺ taught that they must be accorded the fullest cooperation and obedience, and not to rebel against them. The next verse goes on to say, "O you who believe, obey Allah and obey His Messenger and those who are in authority among you." Chapter 4, verse 60. Obedience cuts at the roots of all anarchy and rebellion, and by laying absolute emphasis on this, the Holy Prophet ﷺ laid the foundation for national peace. For the settlement of international disputes, the following verse of the Holy Quran is pertinent. "And if two parties of believers fight each other, make peace between them. Then, if after that one party transgresses against the other, fight the party that transgresses until it returns to the command of Allah. Then, if it returns, make peace between them with equity and act with justice. Verily, Allah loves the just." Chapter 49, verse 10. This verse serves as an excellent model for the whole world, and especially the United Nations. Islam forbids aggression, but urges us to fight, where failure to fight jeopardizes peace and promotes war. This is a teaching upon which peace can ultimately be built, and this is a teaching upon which the Holy Prophet ﷺ based his own practice. My dear sisters and brothers, it is an oft-repeated allegation that Islam was spread by the sword. Such allegations, born out of prejudice and envy, have formed the basis of later claims that Islam is a religion of war and terror. Fair-minded commentators have utterly rejected this false notion of Islam. D.L. O'Leary, for example, writes, "History makes it clear, however, that the legend of fanatical Muslims sweeping through the world and forcing Islam upon conquered races at the point of the sword is one of the most absurd myths that historians have ever repeated." Islam at the Crossroads, page 8. About this, the promised Messiah ﷺ also writes, "Some, in their ignorance, blame Islam of jihad to spread its message and of gaining converts at the point of the sword. They claim that these converts were forced to change their religion under the threat of the sword. Woe to them 1,000 times. They have exceeded all limits in their injustice and in their efforts to conceal the truth. Oh pity, what is wrong with them that they willfully turn away from realities? Our Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, did not appear in the land of Arabia in the capacity of a monarch. It cannot therefore be suspected that he had royal majesty and power with him, such that people gathered under his banner for fear of their lives. A message of peace, page 37.
Nare Takbir! Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa! Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa! Nare Takbir!
The facts speak eloquently for themselves. For 13 long years in Mecca, after receiving the call, the Holy Prophet ﷺ suffered persecution and privations as were bitter, cruel, and sustained. His tiny band of followers also suffered savage cruelties. They bore all these with dignity and decorum, setting the highest example of steadfastness. Never did they offer violence against violence, preferring to migrate from their homelands 200 miles into Medina instead. Even then, they would not be left in peace. The enemy pursued them with the ostensible aim of wiping out Islam by use of force. It was then, and only then, that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was compelled to take up the sword in defense of truth and freedom of conscience. Failure to fight would have meant the extermination of free belief and the search for truth. Yet, even during conflict, the Holy Prophet ﷺ carefully particularized a number of rules of war for his followers, intended to ensure that no transgression occurred. They were forbidden from attacking women, children, the elderly, and the infirm. They were not to strike terror into the general population and were to always keep in view the possibility of peace. Likewise, they were to be mindful of protecting public buildings, fruit trees, camel, cattle, and religious seminaries. Respected Chairman, dear sisters and brothers, the struggle against the enemies of Islam, which appeared utterly hopeless in the beginning, was carried to a triumphant consummation when Mecca, without any bloodshed, opened its gates to the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his companions on the day it was conquered. This conquest of Mecca, this glorious day in the history of Islam, this singular event in the history of mankind affirms more than anything else that our beloved Prophet ﷺ was indeed the true champion of peace. Victory did not spoil him. Triumph did not detract from his excellent virtues. Power did not corrupt him. The world witnessed the spectacle of the most magnanimous and generous act of forgiveness of which history furnishes a record. The Holy Prophet ﷺ readily granted amnesty to his erstwhile persecutors, the magnanimity of which softened even the hardest of hearts. Bitter enemies of the morning became warm friends by midday. Even the most die-hard enemies of Islam could not resist the healing balm so generously and so effectively applied by the Holy Prophet ﷺ.